Seated at like a really premium steakhouse for a weekend celebration, right?
Oh, nice. Setting the scene.
Yeah, and you confidently order a prime cut of beef. But instead of a sizzling steak, the server places a massive plate of yellow corn, wheat, and soy right in front of you.
Wow, okay, I'd be pretty confused.
Right. And to top it off, there's a piece of actual beef on there, no larger than a standard postage stamp. And the server cheerfully announces your, quote, with steak, dinner has arrived.
You would definitely send that back immediately.
Absolutely, you'd feel entirely defrauded by the establishment. Well, that precise level of deception is happening in your kitchen every single day, right in your dog's bowl.
Yeah, it really is.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are taking on a massive mission today, basically completely deconstructing the dog food industry.
It's a huge topic.
It is. We're uncovering the legal, heavily regulated loopholes printed right on your pet food labels.
And, we need to place heavy emphasis on the word legal right from the outset here.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
Right, because we are not uncovering some underground black market of counterfeit pet food today. The practices we're going to explore, they're just the standard daily operational guidelines of a multi-billion-dollar global industry.
It's just how business is done.
Exactly. And our goal isn't to induce guilt about what currently sits in your pantry. It's rather to equip you with the critical analytical tools required to navigate that aisle.
Because that aisle is engineered almost entirely around marketing psychology, right? Rather than actual canine biology.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
So we have a massive stack of sources today to help us build this sort of decoder ring.
Lots of really good data to get through.
Yeah, we're pulling from the 2026 dry dog food reviews, internal veterinary clinic blogs, raw diet guides, and these really comprehensive fresh food delivery breakdowns.
Which are super interesting.
They really are. The core premise we're investigating is pretty simple. That $3.39 can of dog food you toss in your grocery cart every week, it just isn't real meat.
It's a harsh reality to face.
But we aren't going to just, deconstruct the problem and leave you without a solution. We're going to trace the supply chain from these deceptive ladles all the way to a breakdown of 5 fresh food brands that actually deliver on the promise of real meat.
That's the light at the end of the tunnel.
For sure. So let's start on the very front of the bag or the can. Let's play the naming game.
This is where it gets wild.
According to our sources from the Blooming Paws veterinarians, a pet food label isn't really a culinary description. It's actually a highly regulated legal document controlled by AACO.
Right, AACO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials.
Quite a mouthful. What do they actually do?
Well, they function as the primary advisory body that develops the ingredient definitions and nutritional standards for animal feeds in the U.S.
Okay, but are they like the FDA?
Not exactly. They don't possess direct regulatory enforcement power like the FDA does, but state feed control officials basically adopt AAFCO's model bills almost universally.
So they write the rules everyone follows.
Pretty much. AACO essentially writes the dictionary that pet food manufacturers must strictly adhere to.
Got it.
And their rules regarding how a product can be named based on the percentage of an ingredient it contains are incredibly specific and honestly highly exploitable.
Okay, let's test the parameters of that dictionary. Say a consumer picks up a can of dog food and the label simply says beef in massive lettering. Just the word beef. What is the legal requirement there?
Under AAFCO's naming conventions, if the label simply says beef, the product must contain a minimum of 95% beef.
Wow, okay. That's high.
Yeah, and importantly, that percentage is calculated exclusive of the water added for processing. So you are genuinely getting a product that is almost entirely made of bovine muscle meat and tissue.
Well, that perfectly aligns with human consumer expectations, If I buy a product called beef, I expect it to be mostly beef.
Right, it makes total sense.
But the pet food aisle is rarely that straightforward. We see modifiers everywhere. What happens to that 95% requirement if the label says, like, beef dinner? Or maybe beef platter or beef formula?
This is the catch. The moment a manufacturer appends one of those descriptive modifiers, dinner, platter, entree, recipe, formula, the minimum requirement plummets drastically.
Oh boy, how drastically?
It no longer has to contain 95% beef. The legal threshold drops to just 25%.
Wait, what? Just by adding the word dinner, the manufacturer is legally permitted to replace 70% of the primary meat ingredient with something entirely different.
Yeah, something entirely different and presumably much cheaper. all while still keeping the word beef as the dominant typographic element on the front of the packaging.
That's unbelievable, so they just swap it out.
Precisely. You could have a beef dinner where the other 75% of the ingredients consist of corn, wheat, or even chicken, provided beef makes up at least a quarter of the total weight.
But the consumer's eye is naturally drawn to the premium protein.
Exactly. The biological reality of the food in the can is vastly different from what the front label implies.
Let's push this even further down the regulatory rabbit hole. What is the legal requirement if the bag states it is dog food with beef?
Oh, this is the specific tier where the percentages just completely fall off a cliff.
I've there seen myself.
If a product claims to be with beef, AAFCO regulations dictate that the requirement drops to a mere 3%.
3%. That is literally the postage stamp of steak on the plate of corn from our opening scenario.
It is exactly that scenario, yeah.
But 3% is mathematically negligible in the context of an animal's daily macronutrient intake. Yet they can plaster beef across the packaging.
And if you view this through the lens of corporate economics, it makes perfect sense. These tiered naming conventions provide a legally approved roadmap to maximize profit margins.
Because meat is the most expensive part, right?
Invariably, meat is always the most expensive component. By utilizing the with loophole, a manufacturer can reduce their most expensive input down to 3%.
While continuing to leverage the premium marketing cachet of that specific protein.
Exactly. It's a masterpiece of consumer psychology. The human brain prioritizes the high-value noun beef and entirely glosses over the preposition with.
Wow. And I bet the deception goes even deeper. What if the packaging simply reads beef flavor?
Oh, if the label claims beef flavor, the requirement for actual measurable beef muscle meat drops to absolute zero.
Zero. None at all.
AACO simply requires a detectable amount of flavor.
Detectable by what? A lab test?
Basically, yeah. This can be achieved through highly concentrated beef fat, beef broth, or even synthetic flavoring additives.
As long as the dog can theoretically taste it.
Or it can be detected utilizing laboratory analysis. The company can legally print beef flavor on the bag, and they often feature a graphic of a prime steak right next to the text.
If the overarching goal of a regulatory body is to ensure consumer transparency, these frameworks seem to achieve the exact opposite.
But you really do.
They are effectively standardizing the language of deception. Regulators might argue they're preventing companies from outright lying, but the reality is that the average consumer walking down the grocery aisle hasn't memorized the AAFCO rulebook.
That's the crux of it. Regulators operate on the assumption of technical accuracy, whereas marketing departments operate on the reality of human perception.
So the text is technically accurate, but fundamentally misleading.
Exactly. It completely misleads the consumer's perception of the product's nutritional value.
Well, we aren't just being deceived by the typography either. Our own eyes are actively betraying us.
Oh, definitely. The visual tricks are next level.
Yeah, one of our sources, this deeply researched article from Dog Walkers Melbourne, dives into the specific visual engineering of wet food.
This part is fascinating.
Right. When a consumer opens that $3.39 can of dog food, they see hearty, square, meaty chunks suspended in a thick gravy.
It visually mimics a slow-cooked beef stew perfectly.
But those chunks are often a complete optical illusion.
Yeah, in a significant percentage of budget commercial wet foods, those chunks are not intact pieces of animal muscle tissue at all.
So what are they?
They are a highly engineered ingredient known as TVP, or textured vegetable protein.
Break down the manufacturing process of TVP for us. What is actually in those chunks?
The foundational ingredient is typically soy. Manufacturers utilize soy flour or soy protein concentrate, often comprising up to 50% of the chunk's volume.
So it's half soy right off the bat.
Yep. Then they mix this soy base with other inexpensive agricultural commodities like cotton seeds, wheat, or oats.
Cotton seeds, seriously.
Seriously, this mixture is subjected to a process called thermomechanical extrusion. Under extreme heat and pressure, the plant proteins are denatured and aligned into fibrous matrices.
Wait, so they're forcing it to physically mimic the striations of muscle meat?
Exactly. They are essentially weaving plant flour into the structural shape of meat.
That is wild.
It gets better. Once the physical texture is achieved, they apply artificial dyes, often iron oxides or caramel colorings, to mimic the exact hue of cooked beef or chicken.
To make it brown and meaty looking.
Right. Finally, they cut it into uniform cubes and suspend it in a liquid thickened with carbohydrate gums, like gar or carrageenan.
And the resulting product is virtually indistinguishable from a rustic meat stew to the naked eye.
Completely indistinguishable.
So you are purchasing what you fundamentally believe is a carnivore-appropriate meat stew, and you are actually serving a bowl of extruded soy, dyed cotton seeds, and carbohydrate gels.
The brilliance of TVP lies in its manipulation of human visual heuristics. We instinctively associate chunks in a rich brown gravy with high-quality, slow-cooked nutrition.
But the dog doesn't care about that at all, do they?
Not even a little bit. The dog, relying primarily on olfaction, doesn't care about the geometric shape of the food. The entire visual presentation of the cubed TVP is engineered strictly for the human opening the can.
Just to make them feel good about their purchase.
What's that?
Okay, so the visual deception on the front of the can and the optical illusions inside the can are merely the prologue here.
Yeah, that's just scratching the surface.
To truly understand the nutritional reality, we have to flip the bag over and analyze the ingredient list.
The back of the bag is where the real sleight of hand occurs.
And that's primarily because of a very specific rule regarding how those ingredients are ordered, right?
Correct. The ingredient list is the solitary location on the packaging where the manufacturer is legally compelled to reveal their formula.
But it still requires rigorous translation.
It does. Because the paramount rule dictating the structure of pet food ingredient lists is that they are ordered by weight prior to cooking.
The phrase prior to cooking seems to be doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting there.
Oh, it changes everything.
Why does the pre-cooking weight alter the reality of the final product so drastically?
It all comes down to the physics of water and the mechanics of commercial kibble production. Let's examine fresh chicken, for example.
Okay, fresh chicken.
Muscle tissue, whether it is chicken, beef, or lamb, is incredibly heavy because it is biologically composed of approximately 70% water.
Wow, 70%. So the actual protein content is what?
Roughly 12%.
So fresh meat is inherently just wet and dense.
Correct. So when a pet food formulator is building a recipe, they can take a massive vat of fresh, waterlogged chicken and add it to the mix.
And because the water makes it exceptionally heavy, it easily secures the coveted #1 position on the ingredient list.
Exactly. The manufacturer can then proudly print, "Real chicken is our #1 ingredient," across the front of the bag in bold lettering.
But the consumer isn't feeding their dog a wet vat of chicken. They are feeding them dry, crunchy, shelf-stable kibble.
Right, and transforming that wet mixture into dry kibble requires a manufacturing process known as high-heat extrusion.
Walk us through that extrusion process.
Sure. So the manufacturer takes all the raw ingredients, grinds them into a uniform dough, and feeds them into a massive machine called a twin-screw extruder.
Sounds intense.
It is. This machine blasts the dough with intense steam heat, often exceeding 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and subjects it to immense physical pressure.
Okay.
As the dough is forcefully pushed through a small metal die at the end of the barrel to form the little kibble shapes, the sudden drop in pressure causes the moisture inside the dough to instantly flash boil and evaporate.
Wow. So all of that 70% moisture from the fresh chicken is violently cooked off and removed from the final product.
Drastically. The fresh chicken shrinks to a tiny fraction of its original pre-cooking weight.
So while real chicken was legally the heaviest ingredient when the batch was mixed,
In the final dry kibble pellet that actually enters your dog's bowl, that chicken might have plummeted to the 4th, 5th, or even 6th position by actual weight.
this introduces a fascinating paradox when we compare real chicken to an ingredient that sounds decidedly lower in quality, chicken meal.
Yes. Chicken meal or any specific meat meal is a highly misunderstood ingredient.
People usually think meal is bad, right?
Yeah, but a meal simply refers to meat that has already been rendered and dehydrated at a specialized facility prior to ever arriving at the pet food manufacturing plant.
So the rendering process removes the water beforehand.
Exactly. The vast majority of the water and the fat is gone. Consequently, chicken meal contains only about 5% moisture, but it boasts a remarkably dense protein concentration, often hovering around 70%.
Wait, so the ingredient that sounds heavily processed and powdery chicken meal actually delivers roughly 5 times more functional meat protein to the final kibble than the premium-sounding real chicken.
In the specific context of dry extruded kibble, yes, absolutely.
That is mind-blowing.
Because chicken meal enters the extrusion process already dehydrated, it doesn't shrink when subjected to the high heat. Its designated weight on the ingredient list accurately reflects its actual volume and protein contribution in the final product.
The pet food industry has really conditioned us to seek out the phrase real meat and to view the word meal with suspicion, assuming it equates to low-quality processing dust.
They definitely have. But in a dry food format, the dehydrated powder is the vastly superior vehicle for carnivore nutrition.
So if a bag of kibble relies entirely on fresh, real chicken for its protein and excludes any dehydrated meat meals,
then you are fundamentally purchasing a grain-based food, not a meat-based food, once the physics of water evaporation take effect. The math simply does not support a high-protein final product if the primary protein source is 70% water.
Okay, so if the heavy wet meat evaporates and shrinks away into a minor component, what ingredients are actually stepping up to take its place and make up the physical bulk of the kibble?
Carbohydrates, starches, and grains.
Beyond just being cheap filler, carbohydrates are actually a structural necessity, right?
An absolute necessity in the manufacturing of dry pet food. You cannot extrude a pellet of pure meat.
It would just fall apart.
Yeah, without a binder, the intense pressure of the extruder would just reduce the meat to powder upon exiting the die. Starches undergo a chemical process called gelatinization during extrusion.
Gelatinization.
Right. They melt and act as a biological glue, expanding and binding the pellet together so it holds its crunchy shape in the bag.
Okay, but if these starches are structurally necessary and make up the vast majority of the volume after the meat shrinks, why don't we see rice or corn listed as the #1 ingredient on premium dog food bags?
Because manufacturers employ a highly deceptive, yet entirely legal formulation tactic known in the industry as ingredient splitting.
Ah, ingredient splitting. The source from Odyssey Pets highlights this practice, and the mechanics behind it are brilliant from a corporate standpoint, yet incredibly frustrating for the consumer.
It's very clever.
Explain how they manipulate the list.
Imagine a formulator is designing a budget-friendly diet where the dominant ingredient by volume and caloric weight is rice.
Okay, rice is the main thing.
If they simply poured all that rice into the vat and listed rice on the label, it would weigh significantly more than the chicken. Rice would be forced into the #1 spot on the ingredient panel.
And market research shows consumers are highly resistant to buying a carnivorous pet food where a grain is the primary ingredient.
Exactly. So the manufacturer has to find a way to make the massive volume of rice way less than the waterlogged chicken on paper.
How do they do that?
To achieve this, the formulator legally fractures the rice into its various subcomponents.
Fractures it.
Yeah. Instead of using 50 pounds of whole rice, they might source 15 pounds of brown rice, 15 pounds of white rice, 10 pounds of rice bran, and 10 pounds of rice gluten.
Oh, I see. So individually, none of those 4 specific rice fractions weigh more than, say, 20 pounds of fresh wet chicken.
Precisely. Because ingredients must be listed by their individual weight, the final label reads chicken, brown rice, white rice, rice bran, rice gluten.
So the consumer glances at the label, sees chicken first, and assumes they are purchasing a meat-centric diet.
Yep.
But if you mentally reassembled all the fractured rice components back into a single ingredient, the carbohydrate mass would completely dwarf the animal protein.
It absolutely would.
It's akin to a massive corporate conglomerate hiding its true monopoly power by breaking itself into dozens of smaller, seemingly independent LLCs, none of which appear dominant on their own, but collectively they control the entire market.
That is a very apt analogy. Ingredient splitting is a deliberate obfuscation tactic.
It allows heavy, inexpensive carbohydrate loads to hide in plain sight further down the ingredient panel,
Perfectly preserving the illusion that the consumer is feeding a biologically appropriate meat-first diet.
When the meat shrinks away and the carbohydrates are split up to hide their true volume, we arrive at the most contentious category of ingredients in the pet food industry: fillers.
We definitely need to define our terms here. The word filler has absolutely no legal or regulatory definition under AAFCO or the FDA.
None at all.
None. Much like the words premium, holistic, or gourmet, it is entirely a subjective marketing term.
But within veterinary nutrition circles, it has a working definition, right?
Yes. A filler is generally classified as an ingredient added to a formulation primarily to increase physical volume or lower production costs, rather than to deliver highly bioavailable, meaningful nutrition to the canine.
And the usual suspects always come up in this conversation: cheap, bulk, agricultural products like corn, wheat, and soy.
Right, the classics.
But the sources highlight a tier of additives that are shockingly low in nutritional value. We're talking about ingredients like cellulose, which is essentially just indigestible plant fiber, often derived from wood pulp,
Wood pulp, yeah.
and remarkably, peanut hulls. Why on earth is the waste shell of a peanut being added to canine diets?
It all comes down to supply chain economics. Peanut hulls are an incredibly cheap, hyper-abundant agricultural waste stream.
So they just use it as physical filler.
By incorporating them into a pet food formula, the manufacturer can provide physical bulk to the kibble. The indigestible fiber expands in the dog's stomach, creating a sensation of satiety.
Making the dog feel full without the manufacturer having to provide any expensive, metabolically usable calories or nutrition.
Exactly, it's an illusion of a meal.
The sources also point to vague ingredient names, specifically rendered fat. Now, we discussed chicken fat earlier, which seems normal, but what happens when the label just says animal fat?
The absence of a specifying animal species is a glaring red flag in pet nutrition.
Really? Why is that?
If a label specifically identifies chicken fat or beef fat, you know the source. If it simply reads animal fat or poultry fat, it indicates the manufacturer is utilizing the commodity market.
Oh, so they just buy whatever's cheapest.
They are purchasing whatever generic mixed source fat is trading at the lowest price per barrel that week. It could be a blend of multiple species, and it is impossible to guarantee consistency or track potential allergens.
That's terrifying for allergy-prone dogs. It also appears they are artificially enhancing the palatability of these cheap fillers. Finding corn syrup on a dog food ingredient list is deeply concerning to me.
Yeah, formulators frequently utilize corn syrup or other simple sugars to improve palatability because dogs, like humans, possess sweet receptors and are instinctively drawn to sugar.
But they don't actually need it, do they?
Not at all. Canine metabolic pathways have absolutely no biological requirement for simple dietary sugars.
If the scientific consensus, as reflected in our sources, confirms that dogs possess a carnivorous bias, diluting their daily intake with peanut hulls, generic commodity fats, and corn syrup seems crazy.
It's definitely not optimal.
It seems equivalent to feeding a human child a steady diet of sawdust mixed with fast food fry oil and pure sugar, simply because it is shelf-stable and cheap to manufacture.
Biologically, the systemic hull is highly comparable. Dogs possess relatively short, highly acidic digestive tracts compared to obligate herbivores.
So they aren't built to process this stuff.
Right. Their entire gastrointestinal architecture is evolved to rapidly process, extract, and assimilate nutrients from dense animal tissue.
When you flood that specialized system with massive volumes of low-value complex starches and indigestible fibers,
You place a tremendous chronic strain on their digestive organs. They are forced to consume a much larger physical volume of food just to extract their baseline macronutrient requirements.
this constant metabolic strain has to manifest physically, right?
It does, frequently resulting in a cascade of chronic modern canine ailments. Widespread obesity, insulin resistance, severe skin hotspots, chronic loose stools, and persistent systemic inflammation.
The inclusion of cheap fillers is concerning enough, but the Darwin's Pet Source outlines a separate category of ingredients that are genuinely alarming: the chemical preservatives.
Ah, yes. Necessary to keep these carbohydrate-heavy, fat-sprayed kibbles shelf-stable for years.
Preserving kibble is a massive logistical challenge, isn't it?
Huge challenge. After the kibble is extruded and dried, it is typically sprayed with liquid fats to make it appealing to the dog. If those fats are exposed to oxygen, they undergo lipid oxidation, they turn rancid rapidly.
To prevent this, the food must be heavily preserved. Premium brands typically utilize natural antioxidants, right, like mixed tocopherols.
Which are essentially variations of vitamin E or botanical extracts like rosemary. But budget brands, prioritizing extreme shelf life and lower costs, frequently rely on synthetic chemical preservatives.
The sources specifically name BHA, BHT, and ethoxyquin. Now, ethoxyquin is a chemical compound that is strictly regulated and often banned for direct human consumption, yet it persistently finds its way into the pet food supply chain, particularly through fish meals.
Yes, it's a known issue.
And the FDA has actually initiated a comprehensive reassessment of BHA due to compounding safety concerns and its potential as a carcinogen.
The lengths to which the industry will go to ensure shelf stability are really extreme.
The ProDiet source highlights a particularly jarring development. A patent was recently acquired detailing the use of polyethylene as a preservative agent in pet foods to artificially extend their shelf life.
It's hard to believe, but yes.
Polyethylene, the chemical foundation of the world's most common plastic, used to manufacture grocery bags and water bottles.
Yeah. The concept that polymer variations could be utilized to indefinitely suspend the degradation of an animal's daily nutritional intake perfectly highlights the underlying priorities of certain segments of the industry.
Logistics, supply chain viability, and profit margins frequently supersede biological appropriateness.
Exactly.
Before listeners rush to their pantries to throw away anything containing plant matter, we must establish a vital nuance regarding these ingredients. Not every plant inclusion is a harmful filler, correct?
Absolutely not. It is critical to differentiate between useless agricultural waste and highly functional botanical ingredients.
Okay, give me an example of a good one.
Well, beet pulp is frequently derided by aggressive marketing campaigns as a cheap filler. In reality, beet pulp is an exceptional source of prebiotic fiber.
Prebiotic fiber, okay.
It resists digestion in the small intestine and ferments in the colon, producing short-chain fatty acids that directly feed the beneficial microbiome in a dog's gut, promoting optimal gastrointestinal health.
The sources also highlight whole oats as a positive inclusion.
Whole oats are vastly superior to refined corn or wheat fractions. They provide a slow-burning, sustained source of metabolic energy, and they are packed with essential B vitamins and minerals.
So the core issue is never the mere presence of plant matter. It is the proportion and the quality.
Right. A measured inclusion of whole oats or prebiotic beet pulp in a diet that is heavily anchored by dense animal protein is excellent nutritional science.
But a diet where 60% of the caloric volume is derived from fractured corn gluten meal is a biological hazard.
Precisely.
We rightly scrutinize the inclusion of peanut hulls and synthetic plastics, but this leads us to one of the most fascinating psychological contradictions in pet food.
The byproducts.
Yes, there is a specific class of ingredients on the back of the bag that modern marketing has trained us to absolutely despise. We view it as the ultimate hallmark of cheap, low-quality food.
Yet nutritionally, it might be the single healthiest component in the entire formulation.
Let's discuss byproducts.
The demonization of byproducts is perhaps the most successful and most biologically inaccurate marketing campaign in the history of pet nutrition.
To fundamentally understand byproducts, we have to look past the visceral human reaction and return to the strict AAFCO legal definition.
We do.
According to the Northtown Veterinary Hospital source, AAFCO defines a meat byproduct as, quote, non-rendered clean parts other than meat derived from slaughtered mammals. It includes, but is not limited to, lungs, spleen, kidneys, brain, liver, blood, bone, stomach, and intestine.
It is equally important to examine what that legal definition explicitly forbids.
Which is?
AAFCO regulations strictly prohibit the inclusion of hair, horns, teeth, or hoofs in meat byproducts. You are not feeding your dog floor sweepings.
Well, I have to acknowledge my own culinary biases here. Reading a list that includes spleens, brains, and blood provokes a strong reaction.
It does for most people.
I wouldn't order a spleen at a restaurant, so the immediate instinct is that it is unfit for my dog. Sounds like industrial slaughterhouse waste.
That instinct is precisely why byproducts have such a severe public relations problem. Human consumers project their own highly refined, culturally conditioned culinary preferences onto an animal that is fundamentally an opportunistic carnivore.
So we had to remove the human lens.
Yes, and examine canine evolutionary biology. When a pack of wild wolves successfully hunts an elk, which portions of the carcass do the alpha wolves consume first?
Well, the human assumption would be the tenderloin, or the primary muscle groups.
The exact opposite is true. The alphas bypass the muscle meat entirely and tear directly into the abdominal cavity.
Oh, wow.
They prioritize the liver, the heart, the kidneys, and the spleen. The lean muscle meat, the exact cuts humans prize and pay a premium for, is left behind for the lower-ranking submissive wolves.
Why do they prioritize the organs over the muscle meat?
Because internal organs are biological nutrient vaults. Muscle meat is relatively one-dimensional. It provides essential amino acids and water, but lacks comprehensive micronutrients.
Whereas the organs?
Organs deliver an incredibly dense, bioavailable matrix of vitamins and minerals. The liver is essentially nature's multivitamin, overwhelmingly rich in vitamin A, highly absorbable iron, and the entire B vitamin complex.
What about a heart or the spleen?
Cardiac tissue is vital. The heart muscle is exceptionally rich in specific amino acids like taurine and L-carnitine, which are absolutely critical for maintaining the dog's own cardiovascular health.
And bone.
Crushed bone provides the perfect biological ratio of calcium and phosphorus required for skeletal maintenance. Spleens are dense with immunological benefits.
In the realm of carnivore nutrition, byproducts are not waste. They are the ultimate superfoods.
Exactly.
When you reframe it around evolutionary biology, the aversion seems entirely irrational. And truthfully, human cultures possess a long history of consuming these exact organs. We simply dress them up with sophisticated culinary terminology.
That's spot on. We consume traditional Scottish haggis, which utilizes a sheep's stomach and intestines.
Right. We pay premium prices at French bistros for sweetbreads, which are simply the thymus gland or pancreas of a calf.
Blood sausage is a staple in dozens of global cuisines. We eagerly consume these byproducts. We just recoil when we see the stark anatomical terms printed on a dog food label.
The luxury, ultra-premium pet food brands have seemingly decoded this psychological barrier, though, haven't they?
Oh, they definitely have.
How do they navigate the inclusion of these vital organs without triggering the consumer's aversion to the word byproduct?
They exploit a loophole in the nomenclature. They understand that consumers have been trained to view the compound word byproduct as toxic.
So what do?
So instead of utilizing the legally defined term chicken byproducts, these boutique brands will meticulously list the individual organs. They will print chicken liver, chicken heart, chicken gizzard directly on the ingredient panel.
Which, under AAFCO definitions, collectively constitute the exact same thing as a byproduct.
Legally and nutritionally, they are virtually identical. But by breaking them out and naming the specific organs, the brand completely bypasses the stigmatized terminology.
And because it reads like a bespoke artisanal recipe curated by a chef, they can charge the consumer a massive premium for the exact same organs the budget brand includes under the umbrella term byproducts.
It's all marketing.
Beyond the nutritional superiority, there is a compelling macro-environmental argument for the utilization of byproducts.
Absolutely. The utilization of byproducts is the cornerstone of the nose-to-tail sustainability movement.
The global agricultural system slaughters millions of livestock animals to feed the human population's demand for muscle meat.
And if we consume only the chicken breasts and the beef steaks and discard the massive volume of nutrient-dense organs into landfills, it is an ecological catastrophe.
So responsibly sourcing and utilizing these clean, safe byproducts in pet food is really the ultimate form of ethical consumption.
It is incredibly efficient, it reduces agricultural waste, and it honors the life of the slaughtered animal by ensuring every viable ounce of nutrition is utilized.
The defense of the byproduct is rock solid. So we have decoded the deceptive marketing on the front of the bag, and we understand how to read through the ingredient splitting and organ naming on the back.
Now for the numbers.
Right, we have to analyze the actual numbers. How do we scientifically evaluate the macronutrients to ensure our dogs are receiving adequate nutrition? This brings us to the math of pet food, specifically the Guaranteed Analysis panel.
The Guaranteed Analysis is that small, structured box on the back of the packaging that loosely resembles a human nutritional facts label.
And it is legally required to list the minimum percentages of crude protein and crude fat, alongside the maximum allowable percentages of crude fiber and moisture.
The critical variable in that panel is the moisture content.
We discussed how water weight manipulates the ingredient list before cooking. But how does water content actively prevent us from comparing the final products on the shelf?
Well, the presence of water fundamentally distorts the percentages, making a direct visual comparison between different types of food impossible without performing a mathematical conversion.
Because dry kibble is, well, dry.
Right. As we established, the high-heat extrusion process leaves dry kibble with a moisture content of roughly 10 to 12%. It is highly dehydrated.
Contrast that with canned wet food.
Canned food operates on the opposite end of the spectrum. It can easily contain up to 78% moisture. Wow. Furthermore, if the manufacturer labels the can with descriptive terms like stew, in gravy, or in broth, AAFCO regulations grant them the leniency to push that moisture content all the way up to an astonishing 87.5%.
Wait, a can of premium dog stew can legally be almost 90% water.
Yes.
This creates a massive point of confusion for the consumer.
It really does. If you look at the Guaranteed Analysis on a can of wet food, the crude protein might only be listed at 8%.
And if you pick up a bag of dry kibble right next to it, the protein might boldly claim 27%.
So the immediate logical human assumption is that the dry food delivers vastly more protein to the dog.
But that assumption is entirely flawed because the water weight is diluting the percentage in the canned food.
Precisely. To accurately and fairly compare the two nutritional profiles, you have to level the playing field by mathematically removing the water from both products.
You have to calculate what is known as the dry matter basis.
You are isolating the actual dry nutrients.
So let's run the math on this to see how drastically the numbers shift. I want to calculate the dry matter basis for both examples.
Sounds good.
Let's start with the wet food that is listed at 8% protein and 75% moisture. How do I extract the water?
The formula requires 2 steps. First, you determine the total dry matter by subtracting the moisture percentage from 100.
So 100 minus 75% moisture leaves you with 25% dry matter.
The actual physical food in the can is only 25% of the total volume.
Correct. Now, to find the true protein percentage,
You take the guaranteed protein, which is 8%, and you divide it by the dry matter, which is 25. 8 divided by 25, then multiplied by 100 to get the percentage.
plus the 8 divided by 25 is 0.32. Multiplied by 100, that gives us 32%.
Yeah.
So that wet food is actually 32% protein on a dry matter basis.
Oh my
It's
God.
the kibble. The label says 27% protein and 10% moisture.
Walk me through it.
First, subtract the 10% moisture from 100. That leaves 90% dry matter.
Right.
Then, divide the 27% protein by the 90% dry matter and multiply by 100. 27 divided by 90 is 0.3, multiplied by 100. That gives us exactly 30% protein on a dry matter basis.
Look at the reversal you just calculated. The wet food that initially appeared to only have 8% protein actually delivers more biological protein per dry ounce, 32%, than the dry kibble that loudly advertised 27% on the bag.
Comparing a canned food to a dry food by simply reading the label's protein percentage is the equivalent of comparing the sugar content of a plump, water-filled grape to a dehydrated raisin by simply weighing them in your hand.
That's a great way to put it.
You have to mathematically extract the water to understand the density of the nutrients you are actually consuming.
That is the fundamental principle of animal nutrition. Nutrients, the isolated amino acids, the lipids, the vital minerals, are what the biological organism actually requires to survive and thrive.
Ingredients are simply the physical vehicles utilized to deliver those nutrients into the digestive tract.
You must calculate the dry matter basis to understand the true quality and concentration of the fuel you are putting into the canine engine.
The Guaranteed Analysis panel also ties into another massive marketing trend: weight management. I see an endless array of labels touting light, lean, reduced calorie, or weight management formulas.
Yes, those are everywhere.
Are those terms strictly regulated, or is it more marketing sleight of hand?
Those specific caloric terms are actually regulated by AAFCO. To legally feature the word light or low calorie on the packaging, a dry dog food formulation must contain fewer than 3,100 kilocalories per kilogram of food.
The manufacturer must restrict the caloric density.
Right.
But restricting the caloric density in the kibble doesn't automatically solve canine obesity, does it?
It absolutely does not, and this highlights a critical intersection of human psychology and animal husbandry.
How so?
The canine weight management trend is a direct mirror of the flawed human low-fat dietary craze of the late 20th century. Pet owners purchase a low-fat or light kibble, assuming the food itself will do the work of weight loss.
Ah, I see where this is going.
However, if the owner fails to strictly control the daily volumetric intake, if they continue to leave the bowl full and accessible all day, the dog will simply consume a larger volume of the less dense food to achieve satiety.
It is the exact same logic as ordering a large Diet Coke to mentally justify eating a dozen donuts, but applied to a Labrador Retriever.
Perfect analogy.
You feel virtuous about the purchase, but the biological outcome remains obesity.
Precisely. Volume control is paramount, regardless of the kilocalorie density on the label.
And while we are discussing the intersection of labeling and marketing psychology, we must address perhaps the most pervasive and influential claim printed on dog food bags today, recommended by veterinarians.
That claim carries immense weight.
It implies a rigorous clinical endorsement from the medical community. When a consumer sees that, they assume a panel of doctors has verified the food.
The reality is deeply cynical, though. According to multiple veterinary sources, that claim is almost entirely devoid of clinical meaning.
Wait, really?
Yeah, there is no strict regulatory threshold, no required clinical trial, and no mandated consensus required to utilize that phrase.
So how do they get away with it?
In practice, a pet food corporation can survey a massive pool of veterinarians. If they can find a statistically insignificant fraction, even a single veterinarian, willing to state that the food is acceptable, They are legally permitted to stamp recommended by veterinarians on millions of bags.
That's basically a marketing gimmick designed to bypass consumer skepticism by co-opting medical authority.
That's exactly what it is.
Wow. Okay, so we have successfully decoded the front of the bag, we've survived the deceptive ingredient splitting, we've firmly defended the nutritional superiority of the spleen, we've mastered the dry matter mathematics, and we've discarded the artificial veterinary endorsements.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Armed with this comprehensive analytical toolkit, let's examine the actual market. How do the top dry kibble brands of 2026 stack up when subjected to this level of scrutiny?
To navigate the modern market, we rely on the comprehensive reviews from the 2026 Whole Dog Journal.
What's the main takeaway?
The most important takeaway from their analysis is that the pet food landscape is highly segmented. There is no singular, universal best food.
Because dogs have different needs.
Exactly. A highly active, working Belgian Malinois requires a vastly different metabolic fuel source than a sedentary, overweight senior pug living in an apartment.
Let's analyze the categories, starting with life stages. Puppies obviously require specialized nutrition, but the sources specifically carve out a distinct category for large breed puppies, highlighting the brand Nulo Challenger as a top-tier option.
Right.
Why do large breeds necessitate an entirely separate formulation from standard puppies?
The distinction is critical and relates entirely to skeletal development. Large breed puppies, such as Great Danes, Mastiffs, or even Golden Retrievers, possess the genetic potential for explosive, rapid physical growth.
Right, they grow huge super fast.
If a large breed puppy consumes a diet with excessive calcium, excessive phosphorus, or an incorrect ratio between the two minerals, their bones will grow too quickly and lack the necessary density.
And that leads to problems.
This rapid, uncontrolled growth frequently leads to severe, irreversible orthopedic conditions like osteochondrosis or hip dysplasia.
So the food has to actively pump the brakes on their growth rate.
Exactly. A high-quality, large breed puppy formulation tightly controls and restricts these specific mineral levels and often moderates the total caloric density.
To ensure the skeleton develops at a slow, steady, sustainable pace, allowing the joints and connective tissues time to mature and support the massive adult frame.
You nailed it.
The next category in the journal's review brings us to the most controversial topic in modern pet nutrition: grain-free diets.
Oh, this is a big one.
The sources highlight brands like Farmina, N&D Quinoa, and Kennedy Pure as top options within this space, but they dedicate significant time to unpacking the controversy. Grain-free was the dominant marketing force of the last decade, but it has recently been linked to severe medical issues.
The grain-free movement represents a fascinating and tragic collision of marketing trends and unintended biological consequences.
It started with an FDA warning, didn't it?
Yes. Several years ago, the FDA issued a highly publicized advisory warning veterinarians and the public about a potential statistically significant link between boutique grain-free diets and an increased incidence of a specific, often fatal canine heart condition known as dilated cardiomyopathy, or DCM.
The immediate public takeaway was that a lack of grains directly caused heart disease.
That was the initial panic, but the veterinary consensus has evolved to be far more nuanced.
What's the current thinking?
The prevailing hypothesis is that the pathology isn't driven by the absence of grains like corn or rice, but rather by the specific ingredients the manufacturers utilize to replace those grains.
We established earlier that high-heat extrusion fundamentally requires a starch to bind the kibble pellet together.
Right.
If a company removes the wheat and corn to legally claim grain-free, what are they using as the new biological glue?
They pivoted heavily to legumes. They flooded their formulations with massive quantities of peas, lentils, chickpeas, and potatoes.
What is the specific biological danger of substituting corn with massive amounts of peas or lentils?
The danger lies in how legumes interact with the dog's ability to synthesize essential amino acids.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Legumes possess a high concentration of plant-based protein. Manufacturers loved this because the legumes served a dual purpose. They acted as the necessary starch binder for extrusion, and they artificially inflated the overall crude protein percentage on the guaranteed analysis panel.
Oh, wow. So this allowed the companies to quietly reduce the amount of expensive animal meat in the formula while still boasting a high protein number on the bag.
Exactly. But plant protein is not metabolically equivalent to animal protein.
Because plant proteins lack the complete, balanced amino acid profile that a carnivore requires.
Precisely. Specifically, canine myocardial health relies heavily on an amino acid called taurine.
Taurine. Wow.
While dogs can synthesize their own taurine, unlike cats who must consume it directly, they require specific precursor amino acids, namely methionine and cysteine, to build it.
And the legumes lack these building blocks.
It is a combination of factors. Legumes are often deficient in those specific sulfur-containing precursors.
And there's another issue with legumes too, right?
Yes. Furthermore, there is a working hypothesis that the specific types of fibers and anti-nutrients present in massive quantities of peas and lentils may actually bind to bile acids in the gut.
Meaning they block absorption.
Basically, it increases the physical excretion of these vital precursors before the dog's body can utilize them to synthesize taurine. The end result is a systemic taurine deficiency.
Which directly degrades the heart muscle, leading to the enlarged, weakened heart characteristic of DCM.
That's the chain reaction.
Manufacturers utilize cheap legumes to cheat the crude protein test on the label. And that precise formulation substitution inadvertently inhibited the dog's ability to maintain their own heart health.
That is the stark reality of prioritizing ingredient trends over rigorous feeding trials.
It perfectly underscores why we must relentlessly prioritize dense animal proteins over plant proteins for carnivorous species.
Furthermore, it is vital to note that true clinically diagnosed grain allergies in dogs are exceptionally rare.
Really? But you see grain allergy claims everywhere.
I know, but the vast majority of canine food allergies are actually immune responses to the primary animal protein source, such as a chicken or beef allergy, not a reaction to grains.
If grain-free diets offer no inherent biological advantage, if dogs are rarely allergic to grains, and if these heavy legume substitutions are actively linked to fatal heart conditions, how does the grain-free category continue to dominate half the shelf space in the pet food aisle?
It is a testament to the sheer power of anthropomorphism and the projection of human dietary trends onto our pets.
We project our diets onto them.
Over the past 15 years, human consumers heavily embraced gluten-free, low-carb, and paleo diets. The pet food marketing apparatus ruthlessly capitalized on that cultural shift.
They convinced the consumer that if gluten-free was optimal for human health, it must be optimal for the dog.
The biological reality of the animal was entirely superseded by the culinary anxieties of the owner purchasing the food.
Moving beyond the grain-free debate, the journal highlights specific formulas tailored for extreme ends of the metabolic spectrum.
There are some interesting options out there.
For high-performance athletic dogs, they highlight Origin, which boasts an astonishing 42% crude protein. Conversely, for highly sedentary, obese, or diabetic dogs, they point to Chicken Soup for the Soul, which offers a formula dialed all the way down to just 6% fat.
Quite the spectrum.
And finally, they explore the alternative protein category, highlighting a brand called Jiminy's Craven Cricket.
The emergence of insect protein is a highly compelling development in veterinary nutrition.
Tell me more about that.
Crickets are an incredibly sustainable biomass. They require a minute fraction of the land, water, and feed inputs compared to traditional cattle or poultry farming.
And nutritionally.
Nutritionally, cricket protein delivers a highly bioavailable amino acid profile that aligns well with canine requirements. It is rapidly becoming the premier option for dogs suffering from severe multi-protein allergies to traditional meats.
Or for owners who possess deep ethical and environmental concerns regarding traditional industrial agriculture, but still want to provide biologically appropriate protein to their carnivore.
Exactly. It checks a lot of boxes.
Well, we have analyzed the absolute best options available in the 2026 dry kibble market. But we must acknowledge a fundamental, inescapable reality.
Which is?
Even the most pristine, ultra-premium, ethically sourced kibble on that list still requires high-heat extrusion.
Yes, it
It
does.
still subjects the ingredients to massive thermal degradation, cooking off natural vitamins, and it still fundamentally requires a carbohydrate starch to bind it into a shelf-stable pellet.
That's the nature of kibble.
If a consumer wants to completely bypass the rendering plants, bypass the ingredient splitting, bypass the legume controversy, and bypass the synthetic preservatives altogether, they have to abandon the dry food aisle entirely.
To eliminate the mechanical and chemical requirements of extrusion, you must transition to the fresh food space.
This brings us to the core focus of our deep dive. We are leaving the deceptive $3.39 canned stews and the heavily extruded kibbles behind, and we are analyzing the 5 fresh food brands that actually deliver on the promise of real, unprocessed meat.
Let's get into it.
What exactly defines fresh dog food delivery in 2026?
The defining characteristic of fresh dog food is the deliberate absence of extreme processing. These formulations utilize whole meats and vegetables that are gently cooked at relatively low temperatures.
Just high enough to kill bacteria.
Right, just high enough to eliminate dangerous pathogens like Salmonella or E. coli, but low enough to preserve the cellular integrity of the nutrients.
And then what?
The food is then immediately vacuum sealed, rapidly frozen, and shipped directly to the consumer via a cold chain logistics network. It completely bypasses the violent heat, pressure, and starch binding requirements of the twin screw extruder.
What is the tangible biological benefit of avoiding that thermal degradation? Why does the cooking temperature matter so profoundly to the dog's daily life?
The most profound metric is digestibility. According to board-certified veterinary nutritionists, gently cooked, low-residue fresh diets frequently achieve a digestibility rate of 80 to 90%.
Wow, 80 to 90%. For context, what is the standard digestibility rate for a commercial extruded kibble?
Most standard commercial kibbles hover around 40 to 60% digestibility.
Let's clarify what that actually means. If a kibble is 50% digestible, does that mean half of the physical volume the owner is feeding the dog and half of the financial investment the owner is making is simply passing unabsorbed through the digestive tract and exiting as waste on the lawn?
That is precisely what it means. The intense heat of extrusion damages amino acids and creates complex, indigestible compounds.
But with fresh food, it's different.
With a gently cooked fresh diet, the canine gastrointestinal tract can rapidly break down and assimilate nearly all of the provided macronutrients.
And that leads to physical changes.
This systemic efficiency results in profound, observable physiological changes. Drastically reduced stool volume, significant improvements in coat luster and skin health, stabilized energy regulation, and highly efficient metabolic weight management.
You are paying exclusively for highly bioavailable, usable nutrition rather than funding the transit of bulky agricultural waste.
Well said.
Let's rigorously evaluate the 5 leading brands dominating this fresh space, drawing from the comprehensive DIN 4 Dogs review guide. We can group these to understand their specific market strategies. Let's start with the accessibility tier. Brand number 1 is DIN 4 Dogs.
DIN 4 Dogs has strategically positioned itself as the flexible, highly accessible entry point into the fresh market.
What makes them accessible?
Their recipes focusing on traditional proteins like beef, chicken, salmon, and turkey are all human-grade and meticulously aligned with AAFCO nutritional guidelines. However, their primary differentiator is their operational model.
Right, they don't lock you in.
Exactly. They actively eschew the complex, difficult-to-cancel subscription algorithms favored by tech-centric startups. They operate with high transparency, allowing one-off purchases, and they maintain a dedicated customer service team with actual human representatives available by phone.
That's refreshing. What about the cost?
Financially, they offer a broad spectrum ranging from roughly $5 a day for a small breed up to $23 a day for a giant breed.
If a consumer is looking for the absolute most cost-effective way to transition away from kibble, the Dog Walker's Melbourne source offered a fascinating analog budget hack that entirely bypasses the delivery startups.
I love this hack.
The budget hack relies on leveraging local retail supply chains. The source points out that consumers can visit a local butcher or supermarket and purchase a kilo of fresh chicken legs for approximately $5, or a kilo of chuck beef for around $6.
It's so straightforward.
You can literally acquire fresh, 100% real, unextruded muscle meat directly from the grocery store for roughly the same price per pound as an ultra-premium boutique kibble, completely avoiding the massive logistical markups of a personalized delivery service.
It is an exceptionally valid economic approach, but it comes with a severe, non-negotiable veterinary caveat.
Right, the balancing issue.
Yes. If an owner chooses to bypass commercial formulations and prepare their own dog food, they assume total responsibility for ensuring the diet is perfectly nutritionally balanced.
Because a canine cannot survive long-term on skeletal chicken muscle alone.
They cannot. They require precise ratios of calcium, phosphorus, specific organ meats for trace minerals, and essential fatty acids. An unbalanced homemade diet will rapidly cause severe nutritional deficiencies.
But as a supplement.
Oh, as a foundational base or as a heavy supplement combined with a high-quality commercial diet, sourcing fresh market meat is an unbeatable strategy for maximizing biological value.
Moving from the accessible options to the highly engineered tier, let's look at the brands focusing on intense customization and medical management. Brand number 2, the Farmer's Dog.
The farmer's dog is the ubiquitous, heavily marketed premium option within the space. Their entire model is built around algorithmic personalization.
You have to fill out a whole quiz, right?
Yeah. The consumer completes an extensive, detailed questionnaire regarding their dog's specific breed genetics, exact age, current weight, target weight, and daily activity metrics.
And the algorithm builds the plan.
The company's algorithm then formulates pre-portioned, sealed packets tailored down to the specific kilocalorie requirements of that individual dog. It operates exclusively on a subscription model and generally represents the highest financial investment among the major brands.
Brand number 3, Ollie, seems to operate in a very similar lane.
Ollie is a direct competitor to the farmer's dog, offering a similarly polished, tech-forward onboarding experience.
How do they distinguish themselves?
They distinguish themselves by offering a slightly wider selection of novel proteins, including highly digestible lamb options. But they utilize the same strict, algorithmically driven subscription model with variable pricing dependent on the dog's biometric data.
Brand number 4 is Nom Nom, and this one stands out because of the specific credentials driving their formulations.
Nom Nom is frequently the preferred recommendation for dogs requiring strict medical or metabolic weight management.
What makes them different medically?
Their formulations are not simply designed by standard formulators, they are engineered directly by board-certified veterinary nutritionists, carrying the DACVN credential.
How difficult is it to obtain a DACVN credential?
It is an incredibly elite, rigorous specialization within veterinary medicine. There are very few board-certified veterinary nutritionists globally.
And Nom Nom leverages that.
They leverage this deep scientific expertise to offer extraordinarily precise portion control, which is the singular most critical factor for owners attempting to reverse severe canine obesity. Like the others in this tier, it remains a subscription-exclusive service.
Finally, we reach brand number 5 in the premium alternative tier, Spot and Tango.
Spot and Tango offers a standard, gently cooked fresh line, but their primary market innovation is a proprietary product called Unkibble.
Unkibble? How does Unkibble differ from standard extruded kibble or frozen fresh food?
It bridges the logistical gap between the two. Unkibble utilizes the exact same high-quality, human-grade, fresh ingredients, real meat, whole vegetables, but instead of being frozen or subjected to high heat extrusion, the mixture is gently dehydrated at extremely low temperatures over a long duration.
By removing the moisture slowly, without extreme heat, they prevent the thermal degradation of the nutrient.
Exactly. The slow dehydration process preserves the cellular integrity of the amino acids and vitamins, but the removal of the water makes the final product completely shelf-stable.
So no freezer space needed.
Right. It does not require freezer space, thawing, or cold chain shipping. The industry classifies this as a fresh adjacent option. It provides the biological benefits of unextruded ingredients while retaining the convenient, pourable logistics of a traditional dry food.
We really have to address the fundamental friction point of this entire fresh food revolution, though, the sheer logistical cost.
It's a huge hurdle.
Why are almost all of these brands operating as direct-to-consumer delivery services? Why can't I just walk into a big box pet store and buy a bag of farmer's dog off the shelf?
The barrier is the cold chain infrastructure. Because true fresh food contains no artificial preservatives, no BHA, and no synthetic plastics, it possesses an incredibly short, volatile shelf life.
It has to stay frozen.
The moment it finishes the gentle cooking process, it must be rapidly frozen, packed into specialized insulated containers with dry ice, and shipped via expedited logistics networks directly to the consumer, where it must immediately enter a residential refrigerator.
Maintaining that unbroken chain of freezing temperatures is expensive.
It is astronomically expensive. Attempting to manage that volatile frozen inventory across thousands of traditional retail storefronts dealing with thawing, spoilage, and limited commercial freezer space, which shatter the economic model.
Direct-to-consumer shipping, while expensive, is really the only viable method to solve the logistical nightmare of distributing unpreserved biological material.
It's the only way that works currently.
That logistical reality translates directly to the consumer's monthly budget. Feeding a small dog these fresh services can easily range from $5 to $10 a day. That equates to roughly $150 to $300 a month.
It adds up fast.
When compared to purchasing a $20 bag of extruded kibble that sustains the dog for 3 weeks, the financial leap seems insurmountable for the average owner.
It is undeniably a significant financial commitment. However, veterinary economists point out that the perceived gap is often artificially inflated.
How so?
We must analyze consumer behavior. Many highly dedicated owners are currently purchasing ultra-premium boutique kibbles that retail for $80 or $90 a bag. Furthermore, because they instinctively know the dry kibble lacks biological vitality, they routinely purchase expensive freeze-dried raw toppers, specialized bone broths, and synthetic vitamin supplements to pour over the kibble.
In an attempt to make it healthier and more palatable.
They're essentially trying to reconstruct a fresh diet on top of an extruded base.
I see.
Precisely. When you aggregate the total monthly expenditure of the premium kibble plus the array of expensive supplements, the financial leap to a fully integrated, gently cooked, fresh diet is frequently much narrower than it initially appears.
You are reallocating the budget from highly processed components to highly bioavailable whole foods.
Exactly. You're shifting where the money goes.
When you lay out the biological reality of extrusion versus fresh cooking, comparing kibble to fresh food is akin to forcing a human being to consume heavily processed, dehydrated, fortified astronaut paste for every single meal, every single day, for 15 years.
It's a bleak comparison, but it's accurate.
Yes, the paste technically contains the minimum threshold of synthetic vitamins required to sustain life, but it is entirely sterile, devoid of moisture, and biologically monotonous.
And transitioning to a fresh food delivery service is the equivalent of signing up for a personalized, chef-curated, biologically optimized meal prep service.
But this brings up a deeply philosophical question regarding pet ownership.
Oh, this is the big one.
Are we making these expensive dietary changes because they are scientifically necessary for the canines? Or are we simply projecting our own sophisticated foodie desires and culinary anxieties onto our pets? Are we anthropomorphizing the dog bowl?
That tension, the line between optimal biological husbandry and human culinary projection, is the defining cause of the modern pet industry. And it forces a crucial and perhaps uncomfortable final realization about how we view the food we provide for our animals and fundamentally how we view the animals themselves.
Let's synthesize the massive amount of intelligence we've gathered during this deep dive.
Good idea.
We initiated our investigation by exposing the heavily manipulated legal language engineered by AAFCO, discovering that a product proudly displaying beef flavor might not contain a single gram of actual bovine muscle tissue.
The illusions are everywhere.
We navigated the dark arts of ingredient splitting, understanding how a formulator legally fractures cheap rice into 4 distinct subcomponents to ensure the waterlogged chicken retains the illusion of being the primary ingredient.
A classic trick.
We aggressively defended the highly stigmatized yet vastly misunderstood byproduct, recognizing that organs like the liver and the spleen are the true nutritional engines of the carnivore diet.
But the real superfoods.
We mastered the complex dry matter mathematics necessary to pierce through the water weight illusions that make 8% wet food vastly superior to 27% dry kibble.
That math is essential.
And finally, we abandoned the high-heat extruders entirely, exploring the highly digestible, logistically complex, and biologically superior world of the fresh food revolution, moving away from the $3.39 deception toward brands that deliver real, uncompromised meat.
We have comprehensively dismantled the mechanics of the industry, but I want to leave you with a final, unscripted concept to analyze, directly addressing your question regarding the projection of human desires onto our pets.
Go for it.
Throughout this entire deep dive, as we explored the premium fresh food sector, we observed a massive industry-wide push toward what is marketed as human-grade food.
It's the big buzzword.
The branding relies on pristine packaging, ingredients you would find at a high-end salad bar, and diced meats that look like they belong on a rustic charcuterie board.
It looks exactly like a meal I would prepare for myself on a weeknight.
And that is precisely the psychological hook. But we also established today unequivocally that from an evolutionary and biological standpoint, canines thrive optimally on the exact anatomical components that modern humans find absolutely repulsive.
They thrive on the visceral byproducts.
The blood-rich spleens, the pulverized bones, the raw secreting organs, and the fermented green tripe.
Things we actively banish from the human grocery store.
Exactly. So we are forced to ask ourselves a deeply challenging question. Is our modern obsession with beautiful, pristine, gently cooked, human-grade dog food genuinely about providing the absolute optimal biological nutrition for the canine?
Or is it something else?
Or is it an incredibly sophisticated, highly lucrative marketing tool engineered specifically to make us, the human consumer opening the packet, feel a sense of comfort and culinary superiority about what we are serving?
That is a fascinating point.
Are we humanizing our dogs' diets to such an extreme degree that we are actively prioritizing our own visual aesthetics and cultural sensibilities over the stark, carnivorous reality of their biology? A wolf does not desire a lightly seared chicken breast resting on a bed of steamed quinoa. A wolf desires a raw liver.
We are effectively paying a massive premium just so we don't have to look at a spleen in our kitchen.
Basically, yeah.
That is a profound and entirely disruptive paradigm to end on. It circles us right back to the fancy restaurant scenario from the very beginning.
It really does.
Perhaps we have become so entirely consumed with acquiring the perfect, aesthetically pleasing steak dinner for ourselves that we completely forgot our dogs are perfectly biologically designed to dine in the wild. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. Do yourself a favor right now, walk into your pantry, grab your dog's bag of food, flip it over, and scrutinize that ingredient list with a new set of eyes. See you next time.